So the plenary session 2 is on strengthening recovery governance prior to disasters. The session is going to explore how recovery governance can be strengthened before disaster strikes to improve recovery outcomes and reduce losses. Our distinguished panelists will share experiences with institutional arrangements, legal and policy frameworks, recovery planning and coordination that support timely and inclusive recovery. As soon as the stage is ready, I'd like to welcome our panelists and our moderator. We have another terrific panel for you. The session will be moderated by Ms. Kazuko Ishigaki, the Regional Director for Asia and the Pacific for UN Habitat. I believe we're ready. We can start welcoming people up. And our panelists, Mr. Namane Dixon Masemola, the Deputy Minister for Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs for South Africa. Mr. Aaron Sargent, Managing Director, Disaster Risk Management Authority in the Bahamas. Mr. Norman Chipakupaku, National Coordinator, Disaster Management and Mitigation Unit in Zambia. His Excellency Mr. Saif Juma Al-Daheri, Director of the National Operations Center in the United Arab Emirates. And Mr. Safi Ahsan Rizvi, Advisor, National Disaster Management Authority of the Government of India. I'm sorry, please. Thank you very much, colleagues. And Ms. Ishigaki, please go ahead when you're ready.
Okay. Distinguished guests, eminent leaders, colleagues, friends, good afternoon, konnichiwa. Welcome to Kobe, a beautiful city of my country, which revived from the tragic earthquake which occurred 30 years ago. It's highly appropriate that the conference on resilient recovery is taking place in this city. I'm very much delighted and honored to be the moderator of this very important session. I'm Kazuko Ishigaki, UN Habitat Regional Director for Asia and the Pacific. UN Habitat is a UN agency specialized in urban development and housing issues. We support housing and urban development initiatives and projects in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Arab states. My office, Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, is based in Japan and supports 15 country offices, including India, Mongolia, and Nepal. Cities in Asia Pacific is very prone to disasters. Indeed, a high percentage of disasters happen in the Asia Pacific region. It's projected that by 2030, 1 billion urban residents may face multiple high or extreme disaster risks in the Asia Pacific region. But beyond the Asia Pacific, every region in the world is facing increased disaster risk due to climate change. We have urgent need for resilience, adaptation, and recovery. On the ground, we have engaged with many urban reconstruction projects in Philippines, Laos, India, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Afghanistan, and so on. And beyond that, we have engaged with many reconstruction projects in Africa, Latin America, and also Arab states. We have supported communities to rebuild their housing and basic infrastructures. I visited our reconstruction project sites in Afghanistan and the Philippines, where we have been working with people and communities to build back better. Each time disaster strikes, we feel we want to accelerate the recovery process for the people, but it's quite difficult due to unpreparedness for recovery. This session will explore how recovery governance can be strengthened before disaster strikes. Distinguished panelists from Asia, Africa, Arab states, and Latin America will share challenges and good practice for institutional arrangements, legal and policy frameworks, recovery planning, coordination mechanism, and readiness assessment. These are all important elements of recovery governance. The panelists will discuss issues such as how recovery planning can be systematically integrated into legal and policy frameworks before disaster strikes, how institutional arrangements have shaped the leadership and coordination of recovery efforts, and in what ways national recovery readiness assessments can contribute to more effective pre-disaster planning. They share what worked and what didn't work, and we need to learn from lessons. So before starting, I was asked by organizer UNDRR to invite the audience to share your views on the following Slido questions. Yes. So the question is, reflecting on your recent disaster experience, what governance challenge most constrained recovery and limited opportunities to build resilience? So please participate in this interesting exercise. So you can use this QR code and then get access to the poll. So please participate. It's the first experiment for me, so I don't know how it goes. I hope it works.
You should start picking people.
That's interesting. So, Steve? Okay, so I'd like to close the poll because of the time constraint. So, I can see the limited pre-disaster planning is the first, and fragmented institutional arrangements and unclear mandates is the second, and insufficient coordination with non-government actors is the third. I think you might have felt difficulty selecting because some options seems to be interlinked, but this is very interesting result. So this result shows what audience wants to know from this session. So with this result in mind, I'd like to moderate this session. First, I would like to briefly introduce our distinguished panelists. First, Mr. Aaron Sargent, Managing Director, Disaster Risk Management Authority from the Bahamas. And then Mr. Norman Chipakupaku, National Coordinator, Disaster Management and Mitigation Unit from Zambia. And then His Excellency Dr. Saif Juma Al-Daheri, Director of the National Operations Center from United Arab Emirates. And then Mr. Safi Shassan Rizvi, Advisor to National Disaster Management Authority. Okay, thank you very much. All panelists have rich experiences in this field, and we expect quality discussion in this important panel. So first, before the panel discussion, I'd like to invite His Excellency Mr. Namane Masemola, Deputy Minister of Cooperative Governance from Republic of South Africa, to deliver his remarks from the podium. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, facilitator of this important program. Firstly, before I can make my remarks, I think it's important to correct something on your program. I'm not Mr. I've gone to school and I'm not an honored graduate. I have a PhD, so you're supposed to have written Dr. Namane Masemola. I think it's important for that correction to be made for proper historical records. Thank you very much for inviting us as COCTA, which represent the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs in the Republic of South Africa, which is a ministry responsible for local government and as well as traditional affairs. And in particular, seated here representing my country and His Excellency President Ramaphosa, we take this moment as very important and very historic, given its location, to share perspectives on crucial matters on how do we as nations of the world being confronted by the realities of global change with devastating impacts and realities, we could be in a better position to ensure strengthened recovery governance so that our nations and our communities can be saved and there is faster response after whatever form of disaster would have struck our localities. From the South African experience, firstly, we do have a Disaster Management Act which provides a legal framework on how do we intend to deal with matters of disaster as and when they struck many parts of the country. And of course, quite honestly, in the recent past, we have experienced a lot of disasters in many parts of the country. It be either storm and strong winds, blizzard, felt fires, and differentiated realities of disaster. The legal framework, which is articulated within the Disaster Management Act, clearly indicates the institutional mechanisms that are supposed to be put in place that drives and manage any form of disaster, including how do we respond. And within that framework, we do have a National Disaster Management Center, which is located within our department, which works together with all the 9 provinces which constitute the Republic of South Africa. Those provinces do have what we call disaster management centers, and down to regions or what is called districts or some of those subnational governments. They also do have district disaster management centers linked to local municipalities. From an institutional point of view, that is how we are structured to manage and respond to matters of disaster. And at the political level, to provide the much needed leadership so that these issues can be well handled. His Excellency has put together an interministerial committee which is led by us as COCTA in the national government, comprised of the Department of Human Settlement, Defense, Transport, Electricity, Water and Sanitation, and as well as Education and Health Department. those departments constitute a political and a senior management committee that respond and look at how best we can be able to respond to disasters as and when they strike in many parts of the country. And to the extent that we have been handling those matters, we have been able to put in place between 2023 and now, about 6 billion rands has been allocated to respond to some of those disasters in many parts of the country. The figure might sound big, but because of the magnitude and the extent of the damage, it remains very little, and therefore participation and engagement of private sector is what we are hard at work, working together with them to be closer so that they could be able to augment our resource capacities and resource challenges. And therefore, the essence of this discussion, in our view, is very important because it should be able to locate at the center of recovery, working together with communities so that prior planning, engagement, and as well as building a culture of resilience and responsiveness so that when alerts are given to many parts of the country, people can be in a better position to be very alive to those realities so that they are able to be saved but equally participate in the actual rebuilding of these areas that are struck at some point. An understanding about reducing vulnerability, improving response and recovery becomes extremely important as we deal with this matter so that we can promote sustainable development and response capacity as a people, as countries of the world. And based on the principle of building back better, it becomes extremely important so that we can be able to work together, not only as government institutions, but bring closer private sector, including community-based organizations, to be part and parcel of the overall process. Noting the extent to which we have been able to struggle in dealing with these matters as we seek to help the most affected communities, we have come to the realization that our disaster management policy, though it is trying to help us as a government to deal with these issues, it is not enough, and therefore the President directed the interministerial committee led by our department to review the the disaster management policy and its systems. And to us, therefore, moderator, this meeting is very important because it provides an opportunity, and that is the reason why we had to fly all the way from South Africa, almost 2 days on air, to be here, to come and share experiences, to come and learn from how other countries are grappling with this natural phenomenon, unavoidable as a result of natural realities, so that we can be able to have a well-defined, a well-written, a well-conceptualized policy response that will facilitate capacity, but equally important, enable mobilization of resources, both material and as well as human, as we deal with these issues. There are many parts of the country, particularly along the coastal line of the Republic. Those areas have been hard hit, seriously so, by storms, and most probably because of the high levels of the sea waters and other related climatic difficulties. Inland, there are problems of felt fires, including even some places sinkholes, because South Africa it's one of the countries endowed with mineral resources. Those resources in the immediate, they become very good for our economy as part of extraction and industrialization. But over time, once they are actually depleted, those areas become a problem because there are so many open mines with serious environmental difficulties, and over time, they become serious issues of disaster. And how best we work together with nations of the world with experience on how they would have dealt with some of these issues in their own countries. It becomes extremely important because in some areas we do experience some minor tremors as a result of particularly those areas where there are mines which have been closed over a period of time. Such communities do experience those minor tremors from time to time. And a country like Japan, understanding that they've gone through some of these problems, We're looking forward to learn from yourselves as to how best you have been able to handle some of these matters. And I think in the interest of time, those are the few remarks we thought we should be able to make across this meeting, as we would be learning a lot from all the participants, including my colleagues, panelists in front here. Thank you so much, moderator.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for very insightful opening remarks. I'm pleased that your remarks set the stage for this important session. From your remarks, I got the very important points. The first is political leadership is crucial. Yeah, crucial and decisive for recovery governance. And also, you shared your insights regarding community, working together with community, which is crucial. Yeah, and this is often overlooked in the discussion of recovery discussion. So I think it's quite important insights you provided to this session. So thank you very much, Your Excellency. Because of time constraint, so I will open the floor to the panelists. So Your Excellency, I thought you will stay. You can stay or go back to whichever you want. Please, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm very glad you stay and join the panel discussion. So I will start a panel discussion. I will ask core questions to each panelist, and after one round, I will come back again to each panelist to ask the follow-up questions. After our discussion, I want to spare time to open the floor to questions from audience. Therefore, I'd like to request each panelist to limit your response within 3 to 4 minutes. So I appreciate your collaboration. So first, I'd like to ask Mr. Sargent from Bahamas to share your experience. The Bahamas had been repeatedly hit by hurricane, and my question is, what governance or legal reforms have been introduced in Bahamas to strengthen the recovery system before disaster strikes?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. And firstly, let me just say that I am happy to be here representing not only my country on behalf of our Prime Minister, the Honorable Philip Davis, and my Minister who's responsible for disaster risk management, Leon Lundy, but also representing the SID's viewpoint and perspective on recovery, resilience, and the Caribbean region at that. As you stated, Hurricane Dorian, and it's important, I believe Your Excellency made a good point about us traveling to these venues and conferences to highlight the need for further dialogue and discussion. It took me, I think it felt like 2 days to get here, but I think it's important, and I believe my first day in terms of the recovery framework assessment tool are things that need to be further impressed upon, especially my colleagues in the Caribbean, as we see the inundation of climate change shocks to our various countries. Interestingly, the poll that came up when we first started highlighted some of the critical themes that the Bahamas had to address after one of the most devastating storms in our history, which is Hurricane Dorian, which is 6 years to September 1st. And some of those recurring themes and challenges the legislation sought to address. And so they include proactivity in planning, cross-sector coordination, and ready and sustainable funding. I think those 3 themes, our Disaster Risk Management Act, which formed a new agile disaster management agency called the Disaster Risk Management Authority, which I have the opportunity to lead, was birthed out of the response to the lessons learned from Hurricane Dorian. What we saw was a lack of proactivity in planning across the board. And so the legislation, which was passed in December of 2022 and then finally operationalized last year, July, sought to create an independent body. In the past, it was just considered a department of government. We now have a statutory body that is independent, flexible, the ability to make quick and decisive decisions. It brings a comprehensive mandate across the full spectrum of the disaster cycle. We are now mandated to develop and codify national standards, protocols. We've just, in listening to my colleague and his introduction, it's interesting to note how many similarities that we have, even though we are so geographically apart from one another. One of the things that we have just implemented is an interministerial committee on DRM, which is headed by our Prime Minister and several of his cabinet colleagues. The authority is now that the secretariat, which that body is the conduit to both advise the Prime Minister as well as the authority and approve the work of the authority. So many of the policy instruments that we now mandated to develop as a part of our overall national disaster risk management policy framework have to be approved. Just recently, the Council would have met and approved 4 initial key foundational policy instruments. That's our National Disaster Emergency Plan, the National Disaster Coordination Protocols, the National Humanitarian Standards, the benchmarks for disaster risk analysis. And so those are key critical documents that the authority will use to build up. And again, we are in our infancy stages. And so these conferences provide a great listening tool for us to further develop the foundational pieces of our policy framework. It calls for the continuity of the public service. And so now all public bodies, ministries, agencies are now mandated to develop public body plans, which highlight, the continuity of operations. We are now able to see what are their plans for from their respective agencies during times of crisis. There's oversight mechanisms where now the authority has to be involved in building permit exercises. And so learning from the lessons of building, I think in Hurricane Dorian, we saw unregulated communities that were built and created some of the, there was really a lot of damage in those communities because they were unregulated in terms of the development of how they grew, the building structures, etc. And then also, the plan also now calls for the development of a mass evacuation plan. As you know, the Bahamas is an archipelagic nation, and managing disaster risk management over 17 inhabited islands is really a challenge. Logistically, when you put the Bahamas together from a Caribbean context, we are bigger than Jamaica in terms of geographical span. And so putting in place a decentralized approach that empowers local communities to act during times of disaster. And then cross-sector coordination. So a whole of government, a whole of country approach to recovery governance. And so the DRM Act ensures that recovery decisions benefit a whole of government coordination and a whole of society engagement. We now have the codified in the legislation the ability to include non-government actors through the development and establishment of a national non-governmental consultative committee, which includes faith-based organizations, NGOs that directly are involved in disaster governance, and ensures that they have a seat to the table during times of crisis. I know one of the lessons from Hurricane Dorian was that NGOs wanted to participate. They came heavily on the ground, and a lot of Bahamians and citizens are thankful for some of the work. But because of that lack of coordination, we see where their efforts were either futile in terms of the assistance that they wanted to provide. And so in closing, I think those are the key points, some of the lessons learned in terms of our governance structure. I'll touch on some of the other points later on in our discussion, which speaks to financial strategy, et cetera. But those are the things I would like to highlight.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sergeant. I was very much impressed with progress of developing so many mechanisms and also the very systematic approach the Bahamas have taken. So it's quite insightful for us because we need to promote the cross-sectoral coordination and also full of society approach. So I was very much impressed that your country is engaging every organizations and also civil society like NGOs. So we can learn from Bahamas experiments. So I will come back to you with follow-up questions, but now I'd like to invite the second panelist. So I'd like to invite and ask Mr. Chipakupaku from Zambia to introduce your experience in Zambia. Zambia is developing its institutional and legal frameworks for disaster management. So my question is, how is recovery governance positioned within these systems?
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much to the organizers of this very important forum, to Your Excellencies, the ministers who are here. Thank you so much, and especially the minister from South Africa. Thank you, sir, for putting the perspective of South Africa, who are very close to us, to understand. First of all, let me just give you a background of what Zambia is going through. My name is Chipakupaku Norman, and I'm the national coordinator. Our department is under the Vice President's office, and this department is responsible for disaster management and mitigation. And I think it's very, very important to start with the long historical situation of natural disasters which we have in Zambia. For a long time, we've had these disasters taking place, a lot of them from 1987. Some of us still remember that year, 1991, when Dr. Kaunda's government went out of power. That year we had a drought and serious disaster. And 94, 95, 97, 98, until recently, the 2023, 2024. These disasters occur in Zambia and have continued to increase because of mainly climate change. We are facing droughts and floods in Zambia, and in the recent past, mainly attributed to climate change. Among the disasters the country has experienced in the last 5 years include increased flooding, as I've said, prolonged dry spells, extreme temperatures, rain, wind storms, epidemics, both for human and animals. I think COVID-19 was one major problem for us. And of recent, we have also seen crop pest infestations. Right away, we're dealing with the locusts in the Western Province. And we have also dealt with fall armyworms. These disasters have occasioned a trail of destruction throughout Zambia, which include loss of lives, damage to property, livelihoods, and the environment and infrastructure. Additionally, human and animal conflicts have been a major increase, especially near the national parks, where we've seen human beings' food being destroyed by animals and vice versa. Just to put this into perspective, our last drought in the year 2023-2024 rain season affected approximately 6.4 million people. Out of 116 districts, 84 districts had a serious drought. And the country had to look for food. And in our case, we had to look for something like $1.4 billion to be able to address the situation which we had in 2023-2024. And for us as well, the issue of the national budget as the only major fallback, we really had to struggle because we only had about $51.2 million US dollars, which was available, but we had to look for money to save lives. It was a hard struggle for us. And we continue to face that problem. We continued to import food. We continue to try and feed our people throughout the country. In the case of the government challenges, the biggest problem is inadequate ring-fenced funds, which are readily available resources for response and recovery. That is the biggest challenge. The first line of disaster in our case, response and recovery, available in the country is our national budget, and only 5% of the national budget is ring-fenced for that, and that's not enough money. Take, for example, the year 2023-24 drought response plan, which I was talking about. That required about 10.2% of our budget to adequately handle both the situation. We only had 5% of the budget. And our response really, that part of the budget was the provision of immediate life-saving and life-sustaining assistance to the population affected by the drought, the 6.6 million people I was talking about. And the our recovery objective was to make sure that we enhance coping capacities and strengthening the resilience of the most vulnerable communities, and to mitigate the impact of drought through the implementation of the early recovery interventions. And that could only focus on the response objective at the expense of recovery objective. In our case, the national framework for resilience building should be strengthened, because what currently provided for is inadequate for the post-disaster phase and response. But there's recovery gap. That recovery gap that is also supposed to be taken into the development plans. This is reflected even at a global and regional level in disaster risk financing. Is still skewed towards response and not recovery and resilience building. So for us, really want to focus on preparedness and the resilience. Zambia as a country has no comprehensive disaster risk financing strategy. That brings together pre- and post-disaster financing instruments, and that addresses the evolving needs for funds. And that's why I was excited about the bonds and all the insurance which we have. From a comprehensive disaster risk management strategy is required, which is developed, when developed, can help government have different disaster risk financing instruments layered in such a way that when disaster strikes, the normal development projects are not affected by reallocations. Like in our case, moderator, last year, we had to rejig the whole budget. We had to move money from development projects. We had to make sure that we provided moved money to save the lives of our people. And really what we really need for us is to build capacity, find ways of building capacity amongst our people, helped us to develop that legal framework which is required, and to be able to support the local governments, especially local governments and communities, to remain prepared and to be resilient. I think that's what Zambia really would be focusing on, learning from other people and rebuilding our capacities at local level. I submit, moderator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chipakupaku. You focused on the drought, and yes, financial mechanism is an important part of governance mechanism. So I understand the needs, strong needs for financial mechanism. And also you mentioned the capacity building of local government. And it's critical because many local government officials are struggling with many tasks, and they need strong support regarding policy recommendation, technical support, etc. So that's also one point we need to emphasize regarding the strengthening governance in this recovery framework. Thank you very much. So I will come back to you after the first round. So next, I'd like to invite Your Excellency, Dr. Saif Juma Al-Dahaili from UAE, to share your experience And UAE has excellent climate and resilience strategies. And my question to you is, how is UAE aligning national recovery governance with broader climate and resilience framework?
Okay. Thank you, moderator. Thank you. Would like to thank first the Japan government and UNDRR for hosting the event, and great to be within the distinguished panelists today. The UAE has a national recovery framework. It was launched a few years ago. It focuses on social economy, security, food and health dimension. In addition to that, in COVID-19, the government established a recovery committee, and this National Recovery Committee focused on multiple dimensions as well, including education, technology, society, and community. So, having said that, within the recovery, we also focus on including such dimension within the water security strategy, as well as the National Climate Change Strategy 2050. So the UAE has aligned the DRR and the climate policy, recovery, governance, and addresses both immediate hazards and risk. That includes floods and storm. 2 years back, we had an extreme weather because of climate change. We have not faced for the last 4 decades. We had a heavy storm and heavy rains that affected most of the UAE. But because we have invested hardly on recovery and business continuity and service continuity, we could recover in 72 hours. This is just a great achievement how the UAE looks back on risk that are emerging, plus the climate change effect that also strike most of the world. I'll try to keep myself sharp here because of time. The most important takeaway for me would be governance and climate resilience are two sides of the same coin. By embedding recovery into national climate and resilience strategies, we move from reacting to disaster towards shaping a future where risks are anticipated, vulnerabilities are reduced, and societies emerge stronger after every shock. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing the impressive result of investment and business continuity planning. So 73 hours recovery is quite fast and very, very surprising. And also you mentioned the importance of the transformation from reactive approach to proactive approach, which is quite insightful to all of us. So thank you very much. And I will move to the last panelist, Mr. Rizvi from India. I just came back from Kerala, India, 2 days ago. I attended a big conference organized by Kerala state government regarding urban policy. And one of the most mentioned topics was actually the disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation. So my question to you is how national and state authorities coordinate to ensure recovery is timely, inclusive, and risk-informed. And this is a very important question in every decentralized countries. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. And that was nice that you visited Kerala, the state in India that is experiencing a lot of coastal erosion. It is hit by both sides of the monsoon, once when it enters India and once when it leaves. So that is a very disaster-prone state. So in India, essentially, given the fact that the year 2024 were the hottest years on earth, and that impact, apart from rising heat in the seas and rising heat on land, and also the extreme precipitation that is happening as a result, it is impacting, as we just heard, South Africa, Bahamas, UAE, and also Zambia, and all the countries that spoke earlier. So everybody is impacted by this. India, the biggest problem is scale. 1.4 billion people, 1/6 of the world's population living on possibly 1/30th of the land mass of the world. So the exposure that India has, given its population density, is much higher than many other countries. That enhances our problem at least fivefold. Then we are impacted by all 17 to 18 disasters that you can list out. And every geography has a different hazard profile. So it's a huge problem. Now, how is it to be solved? So I'll use 4 keywords to explain that. One is, as has been mentioned in Priority Action 4 and the questions you sent us as a cheat sheet telling us that you'll ask us these questions. I'm happy you didn't ask something outside that. The number 1 is coordination. Most important point. Number 2 is informalization. Number 3 is bottom-up approach. And number 4 is financing. So in the first part on coordination, we've created something, a very irregular type of a platform called the Committee on Disaster Risk Reduction for each hazard. So for each hazard, the NDMA just sits and talks ad nauseum with the state governments, the central government, any of the ministries, any of the academicians. The point mentioned in Priority Action 4 is that you should be inclusive of all other groups, including non-profit, for-profit. So we consult with everybody, and we do it in an online mode, doesn't waste time. So that coordinating body is the one that plans our mitigation programs, our recovery programs, our preparedness and capacity building programs. So we have, that is our first point on coordination. Informalization is a very important point. The more we formalize these meetings and we say, okay, this is the name of the committee and it will meet at this time and these are the members, you're killing the committee. The coordination then becomes recording the minutes, issuing an instruction for the next meeting. So if the person in charge is permitted to call whoever he or she wants, have the meetings, issue his record of discussions, and take the discussion in whichever direction he or she wants for every hazard, in our experience, is one of the best things to do. The third, bottom-up approach is very important given our size. So we have the central government, then we have provincial governments, then we have districts, and then we have urban municipal bodies, and then at the 5th level, we have the village panchayats, we call them the village bodies. So these 5 tiers of governance are very well established. Government of India's, all its development and its welfare schemes are focused on these 5 tiers. So we've dovetailed our disaster management spending in all these 5 tiers, and we are now trying to infuse our lowest level, the village and the municipal corporation level, to start raising their demands on disaster risk reduction and how they'll be able to reconstruct better after a disaster. And the most important point that Professor Nishikawa mentioned in the previous point about pre-disaster assessments. That is something that we have started doing in a big way in all our mitigation programs, and especially in glacial lakes and in landslides. These 2 things are really turning out to be quite helpful, especially in this third point, that is the bottom-up approach. Fourth is the financialization. So disaster risk financing was formalized into our public finance in the year 2020, when 5-year awards of about $30 billion, the first award was $30 billion for 5 years, in which 30% would be spent by the Government of India on the states, and it would be spent by the states, as in the provinces. But the Government of India would decide where that money would go. And 70% would be given straight away to the provincial governments to spend on those 4 activities: preparedness and capacity building 10% of the 70%, 20% for pure mitigation, so that's 30% pre-disaster, where all the assessments and all will come in, and then 70% post-disaster, where 40% is for immediate relief and response, and 30% is for reconstruction. So these are the 4 pillars on which I would like to put up India's response on how we are trying to take this whole war forward. As the very nice questionnaire that you put out on Slido clearly showed, that creating the laws and the policies is not a problem. It got 25% or 28%. But the 50% ones were the ones that were dealing with coordination, institutional capacity making. So this, in a nutshell, this 4-pronged approach is what we are following to the question you asked. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was impressed with informalization among all. Because we tend to formalize everything, as a government, that's a task to formalize many things. So you emphasize the importance of informalization, and that is, I think, a very interesting insights from the practitioner's perspective, I think. And also you introduced a very interesting finance mechanism. So, and investment is quite important. So we need to assure investment in disaster risk reduction and recovery, but how to manage that, and I think it's political leadership is quite important, as Your Excellency from South Africa mentioned in the first opening remark. So thank you very much for sharing the very interesting and advanced examples from your country. So I'd like to move to the second round with my follow-up questions. So first, I'd like to ask Mr. Sargent. So we learned from him that Bahamas have developed many schemes, and cross-sectoral coordination of full society approach have been promoted. So my question to Mr. Sargent is how this kind of very systematic approach, early planning approach, reduced recovery delays after hurricane. So how was the impact of your policy? So this is my question to you.
So thankfully, we haven't had an opportunity since the legislative and governance frameworks were introduced and implemented to actually test them. And so we are in constant and consistent planning and revamping. So as of now, what we are focused on is developing and strengthening that recovery policy framework. We just recently established 2 funds that will provide funding for all phases of the disaster cycle, including recovery and response phases. That, again, one of the lessons learned from Hurricane Dorian, and we still see it today, is the lack of sustained recovery funding that allows citizens to return to some semblance of normalcy. We also conducting research during these blue sky times, as we like to call it, on vulnerability and personal and household vulnerability, the ability for those of our citizens that are in family islands who do not have coping capacity, kind of codifying where they are and their ability to respond, because the new legislation places a lot of focus on community level resilience and planning. Additionally, we've implemented budget tagging and climate finance tagging, which shows what the country's investment and spend is on disaster risk management. And that will then help to drive whether or not we need to increase the support to the sector. I believe this is the first year that we're utilizing it, and we're now seeing where we need to increase and close gaps in terms of DRR financing. And just to go back to those funds, one of the creative things that we have developed is, in addition to finding other forms of funding to fill those funds, is utilizing dormant account funding. That by our law, it expires after 7 years, and we're now able to access and draw down on that funding to do a lot of our recovery and also preparatory work. And so, those are some of the things that from the Bahamas' perspective we are working on. And thankfully, at this point, we haven't had an opportunity to test those, but we'll continue to drive those in preparation for whenever that time comes.
Thank you very much for sharing your current challenge, especially focusing on finance, which is a strong need that from the countries and local governments to know more capacity. So thank you very much, Mr. Sargent. And then I'd like to move to Mr. Chipakpaku from Zambia. So you shared your struggle with a drought, and yes, we'd like to support your country, So my question to you is therefore, what support from regional or international partner is most useful for strengthening recovery governance?
Thank you so much for that question. And for us, I think at the moment we'll be focusing on three things. First of all, institutional capacity building. That's mainly providing training and technical assistance to be able to support the training disaster management unit personnel at national level, provincial level and district level, especially district level, because we've just decentralized. And the development of legal frameworks in assisting us in reviewing and updating our disaster recovery policies and legislation. This is to try and make us continue aligning ourselves to this entire framework. And then also the support of local government. They handle the biggest chunk of the disasters. So those are the areas where we'll be interested in. The second one, moderator, is the financial and the logistical resources. We are currently working on our establishing of a contingency fund, the seed funding, which is supposed to be coming from government, but we are looking for matching funds for Zambia's National Disaster Contingency Fund. That is money we are looking for. We are also looking for rapid disbursement mechanism to be able to disburse these funds very, very quickly. And we are also working on the infrastructure recovery support. Right away, last year alone, when we had floods after the drought, 35 bridges were washed away for us to be able to respond very, very quickly. Lastly, is that technical and technological support. Our president continues saying, try and use technology. Technology says, for us to be able to use some of this important technology, for instance, the use of satellite and climate data sharing, so that we don't reinvent the wheel, but to be able to access real-time risk mapping and climate data, e.g. to be able to monitor floods and drought forecasting. Also to be able to strengthen Zambia's early warning systems. That's what we're working on. A huge country, big country, and provinces, districts, to be able to have that early warning system that is integrated to our regional systems, including SADC. Lastly, for instance, is the post-disaster needs assessment systems to be able to give us the technical help to carry out robust post-disaster needs analysis. On the regional collaboration, we're doing our best to work with SADC and other parts of the region. And that's why I think we'll be very, very happy to learn from India and learn from UAE and see what we can do to be able to build our capacity as Zambia. We are here to learn. We are here to try and strengthen the little capacity we have by learning from others. I think that's our contribution. Really grateful that we are given the chance to share, but be able to learn from others as we develop and work towards the Sendai framework. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think international partners or regional partners must strengthen the efforts for capacity building and technical support in terms of many fields relating with disaster recovery. For example, the technical support, the technical system you mentioned, or institutional the governance mechanism or whatever. So we need to do more to support the countries, and also at the same time, I think it's important to support local governments because community is quite important. So thank you very much. So you mentioned technical support, and then now I'd like to ask Dr. Al-Dahaili. UAE, because UAE is one of the technically advanced countries. So I'd like you to share an example of how technology or innovation supports recovery planning in UAE.
Yeah. Thank you, moderator. Just to ensure that the UAE is always committed to the landscape of the world in terms of humanitarian aid and donation, and as you know, maybe the UAE one of the toppest donors on crisis, especially in COVID-19. Today we have our local partner from Dubai Resilience Center sitting over there. They are part of the whole system that we have for integrated emergency system, and based on our colleague from Zambia said, yes, true, the UAE has invested in innovation and technology, and one of which technology that we rely on during crisis is the early warning system. And the early warning system is a full, robust system that reaches out for everyone in the UAE. One other innovative solution that the mobile water treatment units, which provide fresh drinkable waters in case of emergency. That facility just was received by the UAE a few weeks ago. The other thing is the GIS mapping system, and the GIS mapping system is essential because of the data, because of the terrain, and all whatever it reaches on the emergency institutions that are essential for analysis and assessment. The other part is investing on transport during crisis. Because if the road was stuck and flooded, now we have the Etihad railways that connects the east to the west for the UAE, and because of that we are able to use that railways for shipment and transport of goods from one area to another area, especially oil and gas. So these few examples of innovation have given us an advanced range of managing crisis and emergency, and recovery is part of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Because of time constraint, I'd like to invite the last panelist, Mr. Rizvi from India. My question is evidence supporting such a very systematic Indian mechanism. So how recovery assessments have influenced this national policy framework?
Thank you. So since the time bomb has gone up, we'll still... quickly to tell you that in India, as I mentioned earlier, the scale is the biggest problem. So we have 125,000 kilometers of railway lines, and we have 48 degrees centigrade of heat for 4 months at a stretch. And then that falls down to maybe 0 degrees at night, especially in the Thar Desert. So we have extreme heat, extreme cold, rising extreme heat. Then we have extreme rain. So the 3 sectors of infrastructure that are badly hit always in every country are transport, energy, and communications. So all 3 of them, whether it's a cyclone, whether it's floods, whether it's a heat wave, all 3 of these, there's a fair bit of resilience that has come into infrastructure in India. And our trains keep running in the summers. And yes, obviously there's a problem in the floods, but the way it has managed to survive and managed to adapt over the years without NDMA being there. NDMA came in 2005. So there are separate ministries for the 5 big things that get impacted by heat and rain. So one is humans. There's a separate ministry for that. It deals with that issue. One is animals. We have a separate ministry for animal husbandry. 3:1 is the population of animals to humans. So the impact of heat and rain on them is also something that a lot of work is done on. Number 3 is your plants, basically crops and forests. There's a separate ministry of agriculture for that. Then infrastructure ministries are several, the power ministry, the telecom ministry, and various others. They all have disaster management plans. They're all focused, separate sections on disaster recovery, resilience, and various other aspects of disaster management. And there is a 5th one, which I've forgotten because of the strain of this clock. So I think I'll end.
Thank you very much for making your remark very, very concise. And if I may, Your Excellency, Mr. Masemura, if you share the reflection on this panel, listening to the discussion and the experience from other countries, if I may.
Yeah, no, thank you once more, moderator, for this opportunity to close the discussions. I think it is very obvious and very clear that as nations of the world who are troubled by the consequences of climate change with the magnitude and the intensity of the impact from one country to the other as a family of humanity globally. And therefore, meetings like these ones are very important because we share experiences, we share systems, and as well as exchange policy, importance on how best we could redesign our own systems, firstly from a policy point of view, and therefore inform the legislation, and lastly, on how resources could therefore then be deployed, both from a human resource point of view, including, materially, as we rebuild those most hit-hard countries and localities as we move forward. So for me, listening to my colleagues here as panelists with their different experiences, how they are handling these matters from their own countries, I think it's a very important process that we need to continue to have this conversation of national and international importance so that we can reposition our countries. And I'm looking forward, specifically from the side of South Africa, to also build strong partnerships. It shouldn't just end here as a conversation, once-off invitation. We should probably go beyond here. My colleague from Bahamas should be able to come to South Africa. We should be able to visit him in his own country and take forward on-site learning on how particular circumstances would have been best managed by their own systems and, of course, led by their leaders, both in government and as well as in civil society, including even business, because it does have a huge role to play in the whole equation. I think that would be my parting shot, as I appreciate this good conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I wanted to open the floor to the audience, but I'm sorry, already time is up. So I just want to wrap up, but please ask directly to the panelists because they will stay. So please ask directly, ask questions to each of them. And I will wrap up. I think we share the common vision, which is early recovery, of course, early recovery for the people, for the affected people. But we need to strengthen a means of implementation. And I think 3 means of implementations are critical from the the input from the panelists. I think the first is, of course, finance. We repeatedly hear the discussion about financial mechanism, so we need to really elaborate on the finance mechanism. And the second point is capacity building. Capacity building for national government and also local government, not only from a technical perspective, but also institutional perspective. So we need to strengthen capacity building. And the third means of implementation must be partnership, as Your Excellency emphasized, the whole of society approach, not only including national government, local government, but also the civil sector and private sector. That kind of whole of society approach is critical for achieving early recovery. So we really need to strengthen our means of implementation together, and this is our collective efforts. So this is my takeaways from this session. Yes, and if I may compliment in a very short time, so I may add only 3 things. So the first is importance of community. When disaster strikes, people help each other in communities for recovery and reconstruction. So government needs to consider how to support such communities. People-centered mechanism or community-centered mechanism should be the philosophy or principle that could be backbone of any governance mechanism. So no one must be left behind if we focus on communities on the ground. So this is my first point. And the second point is that humanitarian efforts in the recovery phase must find exit strategy. That's why we need humanitarian development nexus. The smooth transition needs proper governance mechanism. The actors in recovery phase and the reconstruction phase need to collaborate together. And lastly, words in the planning document must be transformed into action. We need to act now to prepare for disasters that might happen tomorrow. Disaster risk reduction is the most important, of course. However, residual risk remains. So we need to prepare for early recovery, and such preparation needs action today. The session focused on what governments and partners can do to implement priority actions for strengthening recovery governance. And the exchange of good practice among panelists gave us invaluable insights. So please give our panelists a big round of applause. Thank you very much.